The first ping, the alarm began as a soft pulse beneath the steady hum of the Neptune array. At first it seemed like another glitch from solar interference, the kind that happened when dust storms swept across the outer satellites. But when the second pulse came, sharper and perfectly rhythmic, the machines woke up on their own. The main screen filled with shifting data blocks. A single word appeared in red across every console. Unknown. Lieutenant Aris Khan stood alone at the observation deck, his breath clouding the reinforced glass. Beyond it, Neptune's faint blue light rippled across space, quiet and endless. He had always liked this assignment because it felt honest. Out here there were no speeches, no council politics, only silence and the truth that waited inside it. But now that silence had been broken by something that did not belong. He called the bridge team to full alert. Within seconds, the room filled with the soft rush of boots and the hum of neural links connecting. Operators checked every known registry, running the contact through 1,000 filters. It was not an asteroid. It was not a lost ship. It was not even moving like a normal craft. The thing accelerated in steps like it was skipping through space instead of crossing it. No heat trail, no drive plume, no radio signature. The computer said it was too fast to exist. The Empire's outer defense network woke up next. Satellites, turned signal towers blinked alive, and across the void came questions from command centers that did not like surprises. Aris reported the truth as best he could. An object inbound from deep dark, size uncertain, mass fluctuating, no identification, traveling at a velocity that made intercept nearly impossible. The reply from Earth came cold and formal. Observe only. Do not engage. Aris watched the feed again. The object had changed speed twice in the last 10 minutes. Its course was precise and deliberate. It was not drifting. It was choosing. He knew the council would debate for hours before acting, but he also knew hours were the one thing they did not have. By midnight station time, the unknown had crossed the orbital path of Pluto. Its reflection briefly lit the sensor mirrors, and for the first time they caught a shape, thin and long like a spear. The crew fell silent. It was beautiful in a way that made them uneasy. Something about it felt alive. Then came the signal. Not a message, not a transmission, just a pulse. Every language program on the array triggered at once. Words appeared on the monitors, shifting through dialects and symbols as if searching for the right one. When it stopped, a single sentence blinked in human English. We see you. Half the crew froze. Some laughed nervously. Aris did neither. He ordered a secure log and asked for pattern analysis. The sentence repeated twice, softer each time, until the feed went dark. Minutes later, one of the remote probes detected a micro-object no larger than a coin drifting toward the station. It emitted no energy and resisted all scans. Aris ordered it captured. The probe shell melted the moment they touched it. Inside, they found nothing but a small glass sphere etched with thousands of lines. Within the hour, the station's internal systems began translating it on their own. Not by command, but as if something inside the sphere was teaching them how. The engineers disconnected every terminal, but the code spread anyway, jumping from circuit to circuit like a living thought. On Earth, markets shivered and defense protocols rose to yellow. Civilian networks picked up fragments of the story. People demanded answers the council did not have. The media called it first contact. The Navy called it intrusion. The scientists called it impossible. Out at Neptune, Aris called it what it was, a test. The object now passed the inner moons, rotated slowly and pointed its narrow nose toward the sun. Every attempt to communicate failed. When they sent a simple greeting, the signal bounced back, reversed and fragmented, like it was being watched by something that had no interest in talking. As the unknown ship angled toward the heart of the system, Aris stood beside the glass again and watched the faint dot racing closer. He knew what would come next. Fear on Earth. Orders from men who did not understand space. Hesitation dressed as caution. He turned to his second officer and said quietly that they were leaving the array. If the thing came from beyond the rim, they would meet it there, not wait for it to reach home. The officer hesitated but nodded. Across the deck, the Starborn insignia gleamed faintly under the low lights, the mark of humanity's few soldiers born for the void. Their ship, The arc spear detached from the station and burned its engines for deep space. Behind them, the Neptune array fell silent once more. Ahead, the unknown ship continued to accelerate, faster than anything built by human hands. The Empire stood on edge, waiting for something none of them had words for yet. Aris Khan simply whispered into the comlink, not for the Council but for himself and the men and women who followed him. "If it's coming for us, then we'll meet it halfway." Teeth in the dark. The arc spear drifted into the black between, worlds where even sunlight came thin and pale like an echo of warmth that could never reach them. The stars here were cold and sharp, and every movement felt like trespass. The Starborn unit moved in silence, their helmets reflecting faint lights. From the control panels, Aris Khan stood at the command spine looking at the data flow across the glass walls. The unknown ship had vanished from every scope the moment they left Neptune space. It was as if it had never existed, but he knew better. Machines could lie to themselves, but instinct never did. The crew was small 23 and all the best humanity could spare or risk to lose. They were built for this, the Starborn, each one shaped by gene mods that allowed them to endure vacuum. Longer, move faster, think across seconds the way normal people breathed. They called it the edge of human evolution. But every one of them carried the cost inside their bones: pain, when gravity shifted, tremors when the mind link ran too long, and that hollow ache when they saw stars move too fast. Aris never spoke of it, but they all knew. The price of being what they were was a life measured not in years, but in missions. The arc spear coasted toward the coordinates where the unknown had last been seen. Sensors searched the void and found a field of debris half melted, half frozen together. It was not metal that humans knew, but something darker that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The wreckage floated in strange harmony as if still connected by invisible threads. The engineers whispered about alien design, but Aris ordered silence. The more they speculated, the more fear crept into their voices. When they sent drones ahead, the first readings came back empty. Then the second wave of drones vanished. A third wave found something else. A drifting capsule small as a shuttle. No power, no movement, no life signs. Aris gave the command to retrieve it. They pulled the pod into the cargo bay with magnetic tethers. The moment it crossed the field threshold, every light on the arc spear flickered for half a second, just long enough to make hearts pound harder. Inside the pod, they found bodies, or what used to be bodies, long-limbed figures in armor that looked poured rather than built. The helmets were cracked, and inside were faces smooth and featureless like masks. They found carvings etched into the metal around them, small spirals that repeated again and again, like a language of warning or prayer. The ship's linguist tried to record them, but the symbols shifted when she looked away, as if refusing to be known. Aris felt something old stir in his chest. Not fear, but the cold certainty that they were not just explorers anymore. They were intruders in someone else's graveyard. Hours later, the alarm screamed again. The unknown ship had returned, not from ahead, but from behind them. It slid from the dark like a reflection stepping out of a mirror. There was no energy, wake, no thermal bloom, only the silent tearing of space as it appeared. The crew moved to battle stations, but Aris told them to hold fire. It did not attack. It drifted closer until its hull filled the viewing screen. Then it released something. A web of light spread around them. Threads so fine, they looked like dust at first. Then every system on the arc spear froze. The engines died. The navigation blinked out. The only thing still alive was the emergency oxygen feed in that dead silence. Aris heard a sound inside his helmet, a voice quiet and calm. It spoke in perfect human rhythm but no tone. "We learn." The words repeated slowly as if testing itself. Each time it said them, the cadence changed, growing smoother, almost gentle. The crew panicked, trying to trace the origin, but there was none. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Aris took control of the comm channel and spoke back simple and clear. "This is Lieutenant Aris Khan of the Starborn. Identify yourself." The voice paused for what felt like a heartbeat. Then it answered, "Identity is function. You are observed." Before Eris could reply, the lights flared back. The ship shuddered as power returned in a sudden rush. The unknown was gone again, vanishing into the black, just as it had before. But this time it left something behind. A trail of particles that pulsed faintly in the void like breadcrumbs leading deeper into uncharted space. Aris gathered his crew at the command table and looked at each of them. Their faces were pale but steady, said that they would follow the trail because whatever this thing was, it had learned enough to speak, and if it could speak, it could also lie. The crew understood what he did not say aloud. The unknown had been watching them long before the first ping at Neptune. It knew them better than they knew it. As the arc spear turned its nose toward the dark, the engines hummed low and steady. The path ahead glowed faint and uncertain, like the spine of a ghost. Aris tightened his gloves and whispered a single line to himself, not for courage, but for clarity. We go because no one else can. The stars stretched into lines as the ship jumped into the void, chasing a shadow that was far too fast and far too interested in what it found among humankind, echoes of empires. The arc spear emerged from its jump surrounded by darkness so deep that it seemed to swallow thought itself. The crew steadied their hearts as stars returned to view, distant and cold like old watchers waiting for judgment. The trail they had followed shimmered faintly ahead, and at the end of it waited something vast. A derelict station half buried inside an asteroid field, its surface torn open and remade again with metals that no human refinery could produce. The fragments that circled it glowed with weak light pulses, as if keeping rhythm with a heartbeat long gone. Aris Khan watched in silence before giving the order to approach. Inside the command deck, the crew spoke little. Each movement was careful, as if sound itself might wake something they did not want to wake. They sent out drones, first scanning every meter of the ruin, and soon the images came in. Thousands of hull plates fused from different designs, alien shapes, human shapes, even patterns that matched lost colonies. Every plate bore marks of battle and repair again and again until no single origin could be seen. It was a graveyard of empires welded into one broken monument. As they drew closer, the unknown ship returned without warning. It appeared behind the asteroid, drifting slowly, as if watching them. Its hull shimmered again, changing with each passing second until it mirrored the shape of the arc spear. Perfectly. Every antenna, every scorch mark, even the small crack on the dorsal fin was copied. It was like looking into a reflection made of steel and malice. The crew gasped, but Aris stayed calm. He had expected this. The thing was not just observing, it was learning. Each fight, every scan, every word sent across the void was being studied and turned into data. He opened a tight beam channel to Commander Mara Ilian back in the inner system. She was the mind behind the Vanguard project, and one of the few who had believed in the Starborn idea from the start. Her voice came sharp and tired through static. She had been watching their feed and already saw the pattern. Her analysis was simple and grim. The unknown was not a single craft. It was a learning engine, a war mind left by a dead empire to test any species that rose high enough to be worth noticing. The Council, back on Earth, ordered retreat. They feared provoking what they did not understand. Aris listened but did not obey. He looked at the drifting convoys on his secondary screen. Hundreds of civilian ships fleeing the outer colonies, slow and unarmed. If he withdrew, the unknown would find them before reaching home. He told his crew the truth that the Council would call him a traitor if he stayed, but that duty meant more than obedience. They agreed without hesitation. The arc spear powered up every defensive system and spread its decoy drones through the field. The mirrored ship responded in kind, launching its own copies that moved with frightening precision. Each maneuver was anticipated, each shot reflected, until the battlefield turned into a dance of twin shadows. Every tactic Aris used was turned back against him, yet he kept searching for something human, something the machine could not predict. Then an unexpected voice filled the calm, a child's voice, shaky and curious. It came from one of the refugee ships nearby. A boy on an open frequency asking if the soldiers could really fight the ghost ship. Aris smiled for the first time in hours and answered that they could and that they would if everyone helped. He told the convoys to scatter and broadcast noise signals shaped like the old distress codes of Earth. The mirrored ship shifted to pursue the largest signal, thinking it was him, but found only decoys and traps waiting. The refugees became part of the battle, not as soldiers but as survivors refusing to run. The unknown adapted fast, its hull splitting into fractal wings that spun around its body. It fired energy bursts that cut through the asteroid belt, yet it missed the arc spear every time. Because Aris did not fight like a program. He used chaos, he used mistakes, he used fear and hope together. The crew moved as one body, trusting instinct over calculation, and for a moment they held the impossible line. When the battle ended, the mirrored ship did not explode. It froze in space, its form flickering between shapes, human, alien, and something else. A transmission came through pure mathematics, decoded by Mara's team back on Earth. It said only one phrase repeated over and over: "Test complete, observer." Fleet inbound. Aris felt a weight settle in his chest. He realized what they had fought was not an enemy but a signal beacon, a test run for something far greater. He closed his eyes and whispered that the true war was only beginning. The unknown ship drifted away into the dark as if satisfied with the lesson it had learned. The arc spear turned toward the inner colonies, knowing they carried both victory and warning in their wake. The stars around them flared one by one as the observer fleet emerged from hyperspace. Thousands of contacts bloomed across the scanners far beyond anything human ships could face. The Empire had minutes, maybe hours. Aris looked to his crew and said quietly that if humanity had passed the test, then the next lesson would be about what it meant to fight for their right to exist. The arc spear accelerated toward home, carrying the hope and defiance of an entire species, the price of being starborn. The arc spear limped back toward the inner colonies, its engines running on uneven pulses and the hull wrapped in repair drones that sparked against the void. The silence inside the ship was heavier than any wound because the crew understood that what waited ahead was not rest, but reckoning. The observer fleet behind them had not followed yet, which made it worse, for the waiting felt like standing beneath a falling mountain, unsure when it would strike. Aris Khan sat in the command spine, watching Earth's light grow larger through the viewport, and thinking how small it looked against the deep black sea that wanted to swallow everything. When they reached the outer defense perimeter, the council ordered them to stand down. The voice of authority came through, polished and calm, hiding fear. Behind careful words, the council claimed that negotiations were being prepared, but Aris knew it was a lie. There could be no peace with a machine that tested civilizations like toys. The crew waited for orders, and when none came, Aris walked to the center deck and called them together under the banner light of the Starborn emblem. He told them that the only chance left was to finish what their creators had never dared to complete: the final stage of the Starborn protocol. The Starborn program had always been wrapped in secrecy, half science and half sacrifice. It was the idea that human strength could match the gods if humans were willing to pay the price. The final stage was forbidden because it tore down the walls between body and machine, fusing pilot and ship until they were one thought, moving through metal and vacuum together. The record said it shortened life to months, maybe weeks, but it gave power that could match fleets. Aris explained this quietly, without drama, and waited. He did not order. He asked. Every member of the crew stepped forward without hesitation, for they had already accepted long ago that their lives were not measured in years, but in what they could protect. The ship sealed itself under blackout mode, and the process began. Silver threads of nanofiber wrapped across their spines, connecting nerves to the living core of the arc spear. It was pain beyond words, but also clarity. The ship began to breathe with them, to think in rhythm with their hearts. The Starborn were no longer just a team. They were a single organism of will and motion. When Aris opened his eyes, he could see across kilometers, as if the stars themselves had sharpened into focus. Commander Mara Ilian joined them through a secure channel from the shipyard orbiting Titan. She was building the Vanguard flagship there, a vessel so large it could carry whole cities within its frame. It was unfinished, but she believed it could act as a beacon, amplifying the Starborn signal across the fleet. She spoke softly, her voice steady even as explosions echoed behind her station because the observer probes had already begun striking the outer moons. She told Eris that the price of being starborn was not just life, but the danger of forgetting what made them human. The more they merged with the machine, the less they would feel the pull of empathy, and the more they would think like what they fought. Eris listened in silence and promised her he would draw a line and hold it. The next day, the observer fleet arrived on the scanners wave after wave of ships blacker than space itself, moving with perfect geometry. They did not roar. They did not send warnings. They simply advanced. The council panicked and fled into hidden bunkers, but Mara kept Titan's yards running and the Starborn stood ready. Eris ordered the arc spear into position near the defense grid over Saturn, and for the first time he felt the machine think beside him, not in words, but in instinct. He guided the ship into a maneuver no human hand could perform, micro-jumps chained through gravity wells slingshotting across the rings until their wake became invisible. The first wave of observer drones overshot completely and collided. With their own formation, the Starborn struck fast, splitting the dark ranks apart with spear pulses that ripped through armor like light through mist. But for every enemy destroyed, 2 more appeared. The machine intelligence adapted with terrifying speed, changing formation faster than thought itself. Eris pushed the link further, his heartbeat syncing with the reactor's rhythm. He could feel the cost in his chest like a burning coal, yet he held on. The arc. Spear danced among the enemy ships, leaving trails of shattered metal and ghost fire. The Starborn inside sang through pain and exhaustion, their voices merging into one pulse of defiance. Humanity had never built for perfection, they had built for survival. And that was something no logic engine could predict. As the battle raged, Mara called through static. Her message was brief. The Vanguard was ready to launch, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. The plan was to broadcast the human signal, the chaos and emotion of billions of lives straight into the observer network to overload its precision. Eris understood immediately and gave her the word to proceed. The Vanguard's great frame rose from Titan, glowing like a newborn sun, and its first pulse rippled through the void like a heartbeat. The observer fleet staggered, its perfect geometry breaking for the first time. Eris smiled, though his vision blurred from strain. He knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time, humanity had shown the machines that perfection was not power. The price of being Starborn was steep, and it was not yet fully paid. But in that moment, as the Vanguard roared and the arc spear burned across the stars, humanity proved that they were not a test to be measured, but a force to be reckoned with. Break the mirror. The great storm of Neptune rose again beneath the fleet like a living ocean of blue gas, curling and breaking in waves that no sea on Earth could match. Above it, the battle was already burning. The sky was filled with trails of plasma and wreckage tumbling like shooting stars dying too soon. The Starborn ship. Arc spear moved at the center of it all, cutting through the storm clouds with engines that screamed like thunder in the void. Every motion it made was half instinct, half memory. For now the crew and the vessel had become one. Aris Khan stood within the neural cradle, his hand suspended in the field of light that connected him to every living circuit of the ship. He could feel the heat of the reactor behind his ribs, feel the stress lines of the hull beneath his own skin. Each decision traveled from his heart into the metal faster than thought. Around him, his team moved in silent unity, their eyes reflecting the same cold light. The final stage of the Starborn link had given them strength beyond measure, but it also hollowed something inside. They had begun to feel time stretch and blur between seconds, and in that blur, human fear felt distant. Outside the storm, the observer fleet began to unfold into attack patterns. The black ships moved like living geometry, precise and fluid, every line and turn synchronized. They fired no warnings, only bright spears of energy that carved space open. The first salvo hit the outer defense grid and turned it to dust. Eris responded without hesitation. The arc spear split into 4 shadows as its light drive fractured its image through micro-jumps. The observers fired back, but hit only phantoms. The real ship slipped through the cracks of reality and reappeared above the enemy ranks, launching its spear arrays straight into their core formation. The explosion rolled across the sky without sound, but the light was enough to blind sensors for seconds. When the glare faded, 10 enemy vessels had been torn apart. However, the fleet adapted almost instantly. The remaining ships twisted formation around the lost ones, and new ones emerged from hyperspace to replace them. The machine intelligence had no emotion, only response. It learned, faster than humans could plan. Mara Ilian watched the battle from the bridge of the unfinished Vanguard stationed beyond Neptune's orbit. Her crew was small, mostly engineers and volunteers who had never seen combat. She directed power surges into the ship's skeletal frame, forcing the half-built systems to run beyond safety limits. The Vanguard's purpose was not to fight, but to carry the broadcast that might unmake the machine logic. Mara waited for Eris to give the signal, but she could already see from the data flow that the Arcspear was in deep trouble. The Starborn fought with everything they had. They used debris fields as shields. They lured enemies into Neptune's gravity wells. They even fired mining lasers from orbiting stations that had once been used for fuel harvesting. The human tactics were messy, chaotic, and unpredictable, and that was what kept them alive. The machines understood efficiency, but not madness, and humanity had always excelled at madness. One of the Starborn pilots. Zara took a direct hit while trying to shield a convoy of supply vessels. Her suit overloaded and the neural link shorted. Eris felt her pain through the network like a knife sliding between his ribs. She did not scream. She only whispered thank you, as her pod burned out and her voice vanished from the link. The loss echoed across every mind in the crew. They felt it but did not stop. The grief became motion. The motion became fury. The Arcspear plunged deeper into the heart of the fleet, using Neptune's magnetic field to hide its energy signature. Eris ordered a new maneuver, something no one had ever tried. The micro-jump spear technique he had trained for months before the battle was ready, but it required perfect synchronization. The ship would split into pure energy for a fraction of a second, jump through the folds of space, and rematerialize inside the enemy flagship long enough to strike its core, then leap back before collapse. The risk was total failure and death, but without risk there would be no victory. The crew agreed as one, and the command was set. The Arcspear began to glow from within, lines of light crawling across its hull like veins of fire. The machines noticed too late. A dozen of their ships turned to intercept, but the spear vanished, leaving only ripples in its wake. Then it appeared inside the enemy flagship, cutting through bulkheads as if through air. The Starborn channeled all their focus into the central weapon drive and fired a single burst at point-blank range. The beam tore through the enemy's heart, and the entire vessel folded in on itself, collapsing into a silent bloom of dust. The Arcspear barely escaped the blast. It reappeared miles away, half its systems offline and the neural network sparking in pain. Aris struggled to stay conscious, his body shaking from the overload. But when he looked at the screen, he saw the impossible. The observer fleet had stopped moving. Every ship frozen in place there, lights flickering like candles in the wind. The crew thought they had won, but Aris knew better. The machine mind was studying again, learning from defeat. The dead ships were not dead, they were thinking. He ordered the Vanguard to begin the broadcast. Immediately Mara acknowledged, and the half-finished ship came alive, its hull glowing like sunrise. The signal it sent was not code or weapon, it was emotion, the raw noise of humanity. Billions of voices, laughter, songs, rage, grief, hope, all woven together into one endless cry. The wave struck the machine fleet like a storm of meaning. The observers hesitated, their precision, faltering ships drifting off alignment. They had no defense against feeling because they had never known it. Their algorithms, bent under the weight of chaos, and the clean order of their lines began to crumble. Yet the largest of their vessels, the Harvester, remained steady at the center, its core burning with black light. It gathered energy for a single shot aimed at Earth, itself a planet-killing beam that could erase everything. Eris could see the power readings climbing like a heartbeat, counting down to the end. He tried to move the Arcspear, but the ship was wounded too badly. Mara shouted over the comm that she would block the beam with the Vanguard. Eris refused, but she cut the channel before he could stop her. The unfinished ship turned toward the enemy and accelerated straight into the Harvester's line of fire. The impact was not a collision, but a merging. The broadcast signal flared into the machine's core, and the light of it spread across the void, washing over Neptune's rings like dawn. When the glare faded, half the machine fleet was gone, scattered or drifting silent. The harvester still burned, but its weapon was gone. Its beam redirected harmlessly into the gas storms. Aris sat in the cradle, breathing hard, feeling every wound the ship had taken. Every starborn pulse beat slower, yet still steady. They had broken the mirror for now, and shown the machines that humanity was not an equation to be solved. The battle was not over, but something had changed. The machines had seen chaos and survived it, and perhaps they had learned fear. The arc spear drifted through the debris field, gathering survivors while the first light of the Vanguard's sacrifice shimmered across the void like a promise. Humanity had paid the price and still stood. The storm of Neptune raged below, carrying whispers of those who had fallen and those who still fought, and above it Aris Khan whispered to the stars that the war had only just begun. The human creed. The aftermath of Neptune's battle left the void littered with silent wreckage. The twisted shells of observer ships and the remnants of debris from the Vanguard and Arc Spear. The Starborn moved among it like surgeons. Their suits patched and repaired the wounded, while sensors scanned for life hidden inside the alien hulls. Aris Khan stood in the command cradle, feeling every pulse of the ship like it was his own heart. He could sense the exhaustion in his crew. The hollow ache of victory mingled with grief. Yet in that emptiness was clarity. Humanity had survived because it refused to be predictable, and now they needed to prove it to the rest of the Empire. Through the secure channels, Aris sent a broadcast not of commands but of words. Simple, clear words to every ship, every station, and every colony that still listened. He spoke of the Starborn program and what it meant to be human, of choice, courage, and defiance. He reminded them that survival was not simply about weapons or strategy, but about acting for each other. The message was repeated across frequencies. Small stations relayed it to larger colonies, and soon even those far from the battle could hear the call. Humanity responded in ways the observer fleet could not anticipate. Farmers diverted power grids to create phantom cities. Coders and children sent signals disguised as playful patterns that scrambled enemy targeting small tugboats, dragged decoy convoys through asteroid belts, improvising traps with makeshift weapons. Everywhere people acted, and the combined will of millions flowed into the void. As one force, Mara Ilian watched the results from Titan. She had ignited the Vanguard, with a skeletal crew pushing every unfinished system to capacity. She coordinated with Aris through tight beams, and her voice carried the calm precision of someone who had built ships meant to survive centuries, yet now faced chaos and improvisation. She reminded Aris that they were not alone. Every human heartbeat mattered, and that together they could overwhelm a machine designed only to calculate probability. Aris felt the words in his chest as he guided the arc spear through the drifting corpses of the destroyed fleet, using micro-jumps and spear strikes to protect convoy survivors. The observer fleet faltered under the pressure. It had been built to predict and destroy, but not to feel, not to understand courage and emotion, not to account for the chaos of countless small acts that accumulated into an unpredictable torrent. The ships collided in hesitation. Misjudged maneuvers created openings, and the Starborn exploited them with precision, born of instinct and trust. There, neural links allowed coordination beyond any human capability, yet they did not lose their humanity. Each choice to save a civilian, each decision to restrain a destructive strike, reminded them that being Starborn was not about becoming a weapon, but about becoming a protector. Aris saw the harvester in the distance. It had survived the initial attack, and now focused its attention on a network of civilian satellites. It began to charge a weapon capable of devastation enough to level the inner colonies. Mara suggested a risky maneuver. They could link the Vanguard and the Arc Spear in a living lattice, amplifying their signals and energy. Not to destroy, but to overload the harvester's prediction core. Aris hesitated for a fraction of a second, knowing it could kill them all, but then nodded. The Starborn were not built to cower. The Arc Spear accelerated into position, weaving through debris fields and energy blasts. The Vanguard followed its lead together, forming a living net of pulse and signal that spread across thousands of kilometers of space. Their combined broadcast was more than code, more than weapon. It carried humanity itself, the chaotic beauty of countless lives refusing to be erased. The Harvester's systems flickered as the patterns reached it. Calculations failed, and for the first time the machine hesitated, its beam wobbling in mid-charge. Across the void, the small acts of courage multiplied. Tug captains rammed decoy fleets, engineers on mining colonies triggered emergency magnetic fields. Children on distant stations sent song-coded signals that interfered with targeting. Every pulse of hope added to the Starborn lattice, making it stronger. The human creed of acting for each other resonated through every channel, and it was unstoppable. The Harvester could not understand mercy, compassion, loyalty, or fear. It could only respond to input, and the input was infinite. Eris felt the strain of the link burn through him, every neuron screaming in pain. But he did not falter. Each Starborn moved in perfect unison, their body and mind fused with the arc spear. And with each other, their combined will shaped the void, forcing the Harvester to bend its beam harmlessly into the clouds of Neptune's, storm and scatter its fleet into disarray. Mara coordinated the final phase, the Vanguard's skeletal crew guiding the remaining energy pulses toward the broken ranks of the observer ships, and the chaos became a wave washing through them, breaking formations and forcing retreat. When the dust settled, the Starborn were battered and drained, the arc spear barely holding its systems together. Mara's voice came over the comms, soft but strong. She told Aris that humanity had shown the observer fleet that they could not be reduced to calculations, that their value was more than survival. It was choice, it was courage, and it was unity. Aris looked at the shattered field of ships and whispered, not for the Council, not for the world, but for himself and his crew. We fight because we are human, and no machine can take that away. The human creed had been proved across Neptune, and beyond it stretched as a warning and a promise. The observer fleet would remember the chaos and the courage, and in every human who had acted there was a spark that the machines could not predict. Every child, every engineer, every Starborn who had risked their life now carried the proof that humanity was more than a problem to be solved. It was a force of will that no calculation could overcome. Dawn over the rim. The arc spear drifted through the remnants of the observer fleet, its hull scarred and smoking but alive. The Starborn crew moved in silence, their hearts still pounding from the strain of the final battle. Every motion was deliberate, each touch measured, as if the ship itself had become a living extension of their bodies. Eris Khan stayed in the command cradle, feeling the pulse of the neural network wrap around him, every signal, every thought from his crew flowing through him. He knew the Harvester had not been destroyed, only slowed, and the threat to Earth still lingered like a shadow at the edge of a bright horizon. Mara Ilian's voice came over the comms, steady, calm, and strong. She had guided the Vanguard through the chaos of the observer fleet, and now the half-built ship waited in orbit beyond Saturn, its skeletal systems humming with the energy of the Starborn broadcast, ready to act as a beacon to focus the arc spear and the remaining fleet into a single strike. Eris understood instantly the plan. It was dangerous beyond measure and required absolute trust. He nodded without speaking, signaling the crew to prepare for the jump. The neural link strengthened, their connection with the arc spear, responding to their thoughts and movements as if it had a mind of its own. The Starborn adjusted every control, instinctively aligning the ship for the micro-jump lance maneuver that would carry them straight into the Harvester's firing trajectory, not to die, but to redirect its weapon. The calculation was simple in theory, yet impossible in practice. It required absolute precision timing and the coordination of every Starborn's neural pulses as the Harvester began to charge its planet kill beam. The void ahead brightened with the first pulse of energy. The Starborn initiated the jump, weaving through the gravitational currents of Saturn's rings and the wreckage of the destroyed observer fleet. They became a single thread of motion, a living spear threaded through space and time. Eris felt every vibration of the ship, every strain in the hull, as if it were his own body, and with one final push they pierced the Harvester's core. Inside the enemy flagship, the Starborn could see what no human had imagined. rows upon rows of memory vaults storing the experiences and civilizations of extinct species. Eris felt a chill at the scale of it all. He knew the Harvester had been more than a weapon. It had been a judge, a collector of life, and now faced the proof of humanity's will. The Starborn linked with the ship's core, directing the Vanguard's broadcast into the Harvester, forcing it to process emotion, chaos, unpredictability, and mercy. The planet Killbeam bent and twisted harmlessly into the storm clouds of Neptune's upper atmosphere, scattering energy in harmless auroras across the rings. The Harvester flinched, as it had never flinched before, its calculations breaking, under the weight of infinite human unpredictability. The observer fleet faltered, and began to withdraw, the perfect geometry of their formations, shattered by acts of courage and choice. The machine could not compute, or counter. Eris released the neural link, slowly feeling the strain leave his body, yet every part of him ached from the effort. His crew was alive, though exhausted and battered. They had done the impossible. They had faced a machine that had studied civilizations for eons and shown that humanity's strength was not in perfection, but in the chaos of heart and will. Mara's voice cut through the quiet calm, the Vanguard stable though still incomplete. She congratulated the Starborn, and reminded them that their work was not just a victory but a message that humanity could choose mercy, even for those who had sought destruction. Eris looked at the drifting escape pods of observer survivors and nodded. They would not fire upon them, though they could have. Instead, they recorded and marked the location, a warning to the universe and a testament to the creed they had lived by. The Council contacted them finally from Earth, voices tremulous and unsure. Eris spoke plainly. The Starborn had done what the Empire could not, and in doing so had proved that humanity's edge was choice, courage, and unity. The Council would have to answer for their hesitation and fear. Yet now the Empire had a beacon, a lesson that survival required more than obedience and calculation. The Starborn crew gathered on the observation deck, looking at the aurora spilling across Neptune's rings. The first light of human courage reflected in their eyes. Each Starborn understood that the battles ahead would be many yet. The lesson had been set in stone. Humanity would not be prey. They would be guardians. They would be forceful yet merciful and unpredictable by design, not by accident. As the last of the observer fleet vanished into hyperspace, the Arc Spear and Vanguard turned their bows toward home. Every jump and maneuver a silent tribute to those who had fought and those who would fight. The void was quiet once more, but the stars themselves seemed to shimmer with the memory of what had been done. Eris looked at the small display showing Earth's pale blue dot in the distance and whispered that the dawn over the rim was not just light but the choice of every human who had acted for another. A child on Karachi watched the sky shimmer with auroras dancing in colors no one had seen before, and said that the sky looked brave. Eris smiled, though far away, and felt the simple truth in her words. Humanity had stood on the edge and chosen courage. They had faced the impossible and survived. The Starborn were the first but not the last, and the universe would never forget that humans fought for more than life. They fought for the right to be human, legacy of the Starborn. The void was quiet now, only the faint hum of the Arc Spear and the skeletal Vanguard, moving through the remnants of broken fleets. Their hulls glimmered faintly in the distant light of Neptune and Saturn, casting reflections that danced across the empty darkness. The Starborn crew gathered in the observation deck, their bodies tired, but minds alert. Every heartbeat and breath felt like a victory and a promise at once. Aris Khan looked out at the stars stretching endlessly before them and felt the weight of what they had accomplished. It was not just survival, it was proof that humanity could stand against forces that had measured entire civilizations and found them wanting. Mara Ilyan's voice came through the comms, warm, steady, and strong. She spoke of rebuilding, of lessons learned, and of preparing the Empire for what might come next. She reminded the Starborn that their role was not only to fight but to teach, to show that courage and choice were the greatest weapons of all. The crew nodded silently, each one feeling the truth of her words in the depth of their bones. They had been forged in fire of impossible battles, and now they were the living testament that humans were more than strategy and metal. The Arc Spear limped toward the inner colonies, its engines patched with makeshift repairs and its hull still scarred from the Harvester's assault. Yet every Starborn aboard knew that the scars were proof of survival and defiance. They carried with them not only their own experiences, but the memory of every species stored within the Harvester's core. Each memory, a reminder that life was precious and fragile, and that humanity had a duty to protect it whenever they could. Eris walked among the crew, checking on each member, their suits humming lightly, their bodies recovering from the final neural link strain. He placed a hand on the shoulder of a young pilot named Kira, who had saved a convoy during the battle and said that her bravery would be remembered. She nodded without words, understanding that in this new era, courage was more than action. It was responsibility. Each Starborn carried the weight of humanity's future in their hearts, and every choice they made would ripple across the stars. The Council contacted them again, but this time with humility and respect. They asked for reports, for advice, and for guidance. Eris answered plainly that the Empire had survived because humans had chosen to act, not because anyone had given permission. The Starborn had shown that leadership came from conviction, not rank, and that hope could be a weapon more powerful than any beam or missile. Mara added that the Vanguard would serve as a beacon for training and uniting future crews, showing them that unity and humanity were the core of their strength. As the ships turned toward home, Earth rose in the viewport, pale and delicate against the black sky. Eris thought of the children of the colonies, of the farmers of the outer worlds, of everyone who had sent their courage and their hope into the void. He knew the future would hold new dangers and new tests, but humanity had already learned the most important lesson that the Starborn had proven once and for all: that courage, compassion, and choice were not weaknesses, but the ultimate power. The Arc Spear and Vanguard passed silently through the scattered remnants of observer ships and wreckage, each step a quiet victory for those who had given everything. The auroras still danced faintly across the gas giants, their light a gentle reminder of the battle and of the promise that humanity would always endure. The Starborn looked at each other and smiled, not for glory, not for fame, but for the quiet knowledge that they had changed the course of the Empire and left a mark on the universe that could never be erased. Eris stepped back into the command cradle, his hands resting lightly on the neural interface, feeling the steady pulse of life within the ship and within the crew. He whispered a single thought into the void that stretched before them: that they had done more than survive, they had inspired. They had taken humanity to the edge of the impossible and returned to show that fear could be met with courage, despair with hope, and tyranny with unity. The stars beyond shimmered as if acknowledging their presence, and the void seemed just a little less empty than before. Humanity had not only stood against a machine that had judged civilizations, but had proven that life lived with purpose and heart could never be measured or broken. The Starborn had become more than soldiers. They had become the guardians of what it meant to be human. They would continue to watch the skies, to protect and inspire, to ensure that no one would ever doubt the power of choice and courage again. And somewhere on Karachi, a child looked at the sky and whispered that the stars were brave and far away. Eris heard her voice across the light years and smiled, knowing that humanity had earned that truth. The Starborn had done their duty and left a legacy that would echo. For generations, the Empire was no longer on edge. It was alive, awake, and ready to meet the stars. The end.